I just finished Squid Game, and it is an exquisite television show with tremendous themes, great characters, and I wanted to talk about it because I don't usually watch TV shows. I actually actively avoid TV. If I'm not watching wrestling, usually I'm reading, or I may find an anime to watch or something like that. I'm that kind of guy. But usually, I'm either at work reading or watching wrestling. That's really most of my time. But had some time on the weekend to watch this show. So I decided to do a review and a breakdown. But then I also looked on Twitter and I saw some people arguing about whether Squid Game was a critique of capitalism. And I was like, okay, so I looked for that while I was watching it. And I have to say, I want to discuss that subject, whether it's a critique in capitalism, after I do sort of my breakdown, which is what I do the David Mamet questions, and I talk a little bit about the show. I'm not going to go into any real deep detail, but it's a really good show, and I want to talk about whether it's a critique of capitalism, or a critique of a straw man of capitalism, or not capitalism at all. In any event, let's talk about this show. So, for those of you who have not watched Squid Game, it is a show as much like a tontine, where all of these people who are horribly in debt, they are invited to play a game, and they win 400 and what is it, 45 billion won or something like that, and which is a Seoul, South Korea currency. All these people are broke, and they're all looking for a way out. They're all looking for money. And so they go the point of this game is for to win all of the games, to be the last person standing. The last person standing gets all the money. That's how it works. And I really watched this, and I love survival games like Battle Royale, and that's really what got me watching this. And somebody was like, "Oh, it's just like Battle Royale," and I was like, "Really? I love Battle Royale." I actually tried to write a survival game myself once. I actually completed it. It's actually pretty good. I need to actually try to get it published, but that's neither here nor there. But it's a good game. It's like a mixture of Saw and Battle Royale, and it's very good. And you follow the characters' names are very difficult to remember because they're Korean names. But I think it's Seong Ji Hoon is the main male character, and he's not the best adult. He lives with his mom. He's a bit of a slob. He borrows money from his mom to take care of his daughter. Then he doesn't even do that. He's a degenerate gambler. He owes money to the mob, and he's just in over his head. And then the game, he has the opportunity to play the game, but he is invited to a game by a guy he just meets on the street, and the game is that he has to slam I don't know what they call it, but you have to slam and flip the guy's little envelope. And if he flips the guy's envelope, he'll win $100,000. So he even though he doesn't have 100,000 won, he agrees to play the game, even knowing that he doesn't have the money, and he loses. And so the guy is like, "All right, pay me." And Sion is like, I don't got no money." So the guy says, "You're gonna have to pay with your body." And instantly people think like, what does that mean? So he smacks him. And so he says, "All right, I'm going to keep playing." And it showed this montage of how Seun is such a degenerate that he just continues to play and getting smacked over and over and over again. He does not stop playing until he eventually wins. And then he finally does win. And he thinks after he finally wins, he's going to smack this guy because, that's how it's been going so far. But he forgot. The guy was smacking him because he didn't have money. But the guy does have money. So the guy pays him his 100 won, or whatever the case may be, and tells him there's an opportunity for him to make more money, to play a bigger game. And this is how we're introduced to the game. So the game is a bunch of random people are brought into this. There's like 400, 600 people or something like that. And they were brought into this area. And they had to play children's games. And this one was, I believe it was red light, green light. That was the first game. And they learn, and you as the viewer learn very quickly that red light, green light is very serious within this structure. And a bunch of people get murdered, because you know how red light, green light works. You take a stop, and then when they turn around, you stop, you freeze. But in this game, if you move, you get shot. So they shot like 200 people, were just gunned down. And a lot of people were getting shot because they were scared of other people getting shot. And it was just this really deep, visceral, concept. And it just drags you in from the beginning. So that's kind of how all the games are. They're all just children's games and different things like that, but they're very, very dark. And there's a way to survive, but usually if they catch you, you're under a time limit. So usually you're trying to think of ways to do this in the most efficient way, but then you have the pressure of the clock on you, kind of like chess. So it's very intense. It's very, a lot of tension. It's very good in that way. So that's all I'm really going to say about the in-depth part of the story. Seung Gi-hun is a character that, he is, a lovable loser kind of character. Meaning that you see him and he means well. He's a nice guy with a good heart, but he just can't get right. So he's constantly making mistakes. Like in the early part of the show, he's eating and complaining about not having any money, and he lives with his mom. He's like, my daughter's birthday is coming up. I want to get her something nice, and mom's like, I don't have any money. And then he finds out, he badgers her and whines or whatever, and she gives him extra money, and he ends up taking that and went and gambled the money away. And then the money gets stolen by a pickpocket who becomes one of the players in the game. So there's a lot of different layers here. So that's kind of the good setup for what the story entails. And it's a story with several great themes. And some of the themes are greed and desperation. Desperation being number one. Because people only really get involved with the game because they're desperate. They took the opportunity to try to win all this money in the first place because they were desperate, and all of them are in debt. And that's the first thing you learn from the beginning, is that all of the characters are in debt. They all need money for something. But then you have that second theme, which is greed, which is how desperate are you really? And then you start saying to yourself, the game is optional, right? Early in the show, they showed that the players can vote out of the game. So they voted to get out of the game. And then, they saw how the real world was. Things were getting worse. For Seung Gi-hun, for instance, it was a situation where his mom was sick. He needed money because his daughter is about to move to the United States. His ex-wife is trying to take his kid and move to the United States. And it's a terrible situation. He really, really needs that money. So he's like, okay, got to go back in, so he has to go back and play the game again. And that's kind of, begins the permanency of Seung Gi-hun and all the other players. You get to follow them as they go through the real world and see how tough it is. The pickpocket girl, whose name I don't remember, she's from North Korea, and she was supposed to be bringing her family in, but she can't afford it. It's a lot like the story of Yeonmi Park. I don't know if you know who Yeonmi Park is. Let me explain. She was a North Korean immigrant. She escaped North Korea to China, was sold to sex slavery, and had to pay for her own mother. Her husband, who she was forced to marry, by the way, in China, paid for her mother to be smuggled out of North Korea. She watched her mother be raped in front of her. So that's what I was thinking as I saw this North Korean character in the show. Because I thought, okay, that's the scenario that she's involved in. And her brother kind of runs a guilt trip on her. Like, you promised we would all be together. And she's kind of like, I don't got no money. I can't afford this. So that's why she joins the game. And you see all these other characters, and the main sort of, I guess, the antagonist is Chu Sung-woo. And he is a childhood friend of Seung Gi-hun. And he's, the brilliant one. He's the guy who's so smart, right? His mom always talks about how he went to college and he got this business association degree, and everybody's so proud of him. Seung is so, impressed with him, and everybody loves this guy. But they don't know that he also was a degenerate gambler, just in a different way. he was gambling on futures markets and basically stealing other people's money so that he could gamble on futures markets, and ended up losing a ton of cash. So now he's in the game because he needs to make his money back. So now you see from this position, Seung Gi-hun is desperate, but Cho Si-woo, his childhood friend who has the business degree, he was just being greedy, right? He already had the education, he had the opportunities, but he felt like there's always more. You always need to have more, right? So you see that it's separate. It's the big battle is set up from the beginning to be desperation versus greed. You know, the people who are greedy are usually, when put under pressure, they get violent, they get aggressive. And throughout the show, that's what you begin to see, is that, you know, it's human nature that when you put people in bad situations, they adapt, right? So, you know, there are situations where people are sabotaging others, you know, in games like the red light, green light, there will be somebody like might push you so that you will die and make it easier on them. You know, that happens so many times throughout the show that, you know, you become numb to it, but you never stop seeing how bad and how inhuman it is. So you see that, you know, the greed, the desperation, you see the debt, but you also see teamwork. There are certain parts of the story where characters have to work together. For instance, they play tug of war in one episode, and they have to learn how to strategize in playing tug of war. Even when one side has all men, while the other side has both men and women, the side with both men and women, they managed to win because they had a superior strategy. And that's one of the things that Seung Gi-hun is, as a character, is really good at strategizing. You know, taking his time, being able to try to figure things out. So you see the teamwork and the trust when put in certain situations. You see, you know, bonding. But you also see the control. And the control comes from the shapes. I don't know what they're called. I just call them the shapes. Now, what they are they're a uniform, regimented, hierarchical system where you have at the bottom the people with the triangle masks. They're the bottom. Then the next would be like the square masks, you know, and the triangles can't talk to the squares without the squares talking first. So that's like one of the systems. Then you have the circle masks. They're kind of like the bosses. And then you have the elites. They're wearing glittery masks. And the boss of the whole thing, he's wearing like a black mask that's kind of like cubed or like disco or something like that. And it's all pretty cool because it's completely inhuman. You don't really see anything about them. You don't really learn anything about them outside of, you know, they're faceless, nameless drones. They don't even speak. That's how trained they are. That's how strict it is. They don't even speak unless, you know, they're told to, or unless absolutely necessary. They don't talk. And they carry guns everywhere. So, like, they're the only people carrying guns everywhere. So, and they are the enforcers of the system. They are enforcers of the rules. You break the rules or you don't finish the task in the time allotted, it's going to be the shapes that are going to kill you. You know, they're going to be the ones blowing your head off. You know, so they're not going to converse with you too much. And I really enjoyed that there was a part of the movie where the shapes got, I wouldn't say invaded, but they got, what's the word I'm looking for? Infiltrated. They got infiltrated. So you got to learn about the shapes in their organization. And you see that even the shapes are being monitored. Like, it's a system where the players are constantly being monitored by the shapes. But the shapes are constantly being monitored by the elites and the people above them. So this is a constant hierarchical system, you know, all the way up to the top. And then you see that even the boss isn't really the boss because he's got all these other glittery masks that are, you know, paying to bet and all this sort of stuff on who's going to win the game. So that's a beautiful setup, you know. So you see the control and you get an idea of what this show is about. And it's, you know, episode 6 is my favorite episode of the series because episode 6 was really the turning point. It's when a lot of you really got to see who these characters were as people. Because just like you got to saw the teamwork, episode 6 showed you the betrayal. Throughout the series, you got to see that Seung Gi-hun has befriended this old man. We didn't know his name until later. We just called him Player One. And Player One is sort of, he's a surprise guy who constantly survives these games, and nobody really can understand why. But he actually befriends Seung Gi Hun, and he starts to sundown a little bit. He's an older guy. He's really old, by the way. And he starts to have like dementia. He's kind of forgetting who he is and all this kind of stuff. And they start to pick partners for the next game. You need 2 players for the team. And Seun, they talk about this in the show, that most of the games up to that point have been strategy games or games that involve strength. So in those games that involve strength, having a partner that's either female or old is a disadvantage. And then you see that Seung Gi Hun is a good man. He picks the old guy. Doesn't have to, because there's a woman available. And she's fairly young, but she's also crazy, right? But he picks the old guy because he wants to give the old guy a good chance at winning. And then they learn that the game is marbles. That each team is given 20 marbles, 10 and 10. The point of the game is to get all of your opponent's marbles. And when you do that, they're going to get killed. And you start to see that these guys picked their friends to participate with, because that's natural in a game like this. You would pick people that you can trust. So, husband picks his wife, the team that had bonded together over the tug of war and everything else, they start picking each other as partners. And you see the situation where Seung Gi Hun is with this old man. And this old timer is, he's starting to lose his memory. He doesn't quite remember what's going on or what's happening. And Seung Gi Hun has an opportunity here. He could betray the old man by, cheating, essentially, lying to the old man and telling him, hey, this is, odds and evens. They're playing odds and evens. You have to guess how many marbles in his hands, or not the exact number, but whether it's an even number of marbles or an odd number of marbles. And Seung Gi Hun gets down to his very last marble. And then the old man's memory starts to go. And he's like, what did I say? And he only has 1 marble. But he manages to tell the guy, Seung Gi Hun has to guess how many marbles the old man has. And the old man opens his hands, and Seung Gi Hun can see that it's 2 or 3 marbles, or however many it was. And he lies so that he can win. So he's trying to take advantage of the old guy. And he ends up taking advantage of the old guy, and he thinks that he's got all the old guy's marbles. And the old guy says, like, let's keep playing. And Seung is like, nope. And he's trying to scoot away from the old guy because he's like, you about to get shot, old man. And he thinks that he's won. And then the old man kind of pats his pockets and finds 1 last marble. And while he's got this 1 last marble, Seung Gi Hun knows the game is not over as long as he got that marble, which means he's got to get the old man's marble. So he's trying to get the old man to play the game again. But the old man is, he's a doddering old guy. He's walking around and, talking. And Seung really wants him to play this game. And then the old guy drops the bomb on him. He was faking, right? You were taking advantage of me. And he kind of starts to cry. And the old man gives him the marble anyway because he was his friend. And he was the only guy who wanted him as a partner, the only person who treated him like he might be worth something. And even though in this tight pressure situation, it was the only way that he would betray him, is in this situation where it was my life or yours. So it wasn't really a betrayal, but it's still kind of scumbaggish, And so, we think the old man is killed. Of course he's not. But the other side is Chu. What did I say the guy's name was? Chu Sang-woo, and he's with Ali. Ali is an Indian immigrant to South Korea, and he doesn't quite understand the nature of the game, and he's also playing marbles. And to be quite honest, Ali wins. He won the game. He got all of Cho's marbles, right? And so Cho is like, man, I'm fucked. I'm going to get killed. So he decides he's going to outsmart Ali. So he says, maybe we can find a way to both survive. And but first, what we're going to do is we're going to collect all of our marbles together. So we get all the marbles together. There's 2 bags of marbles. He gives Ali a bag of marbles. He gives himself a bag of marbles. And then he goes up to the shapes and he's like, here, I have 20 marbles. I win. The shapes acknowledge that he won. And then he disappears. He doesn't turn around, doesn't say anything. Ali is walking around, looking like, hey, where did he go? And then he opens his bag and there's rocks in it. There's 20 rocks in there. And Ali gets banged in the head. He gets shot. And it's a gripping scene. It's horrifying, you know. But that's the scene where you see how horrible the game really is. Like, the game is terrible, even up to this point. But you can see how horrifying it is and how cold you have to be to just turn your back on a friend and allow them to get their head blown off. And knowing that you technically lost. There was other people who had tricked their partners into playing other games and they still got killed and stuff like that. It was crazy. So I've said enough about the show and about the themes. So let's talk about the David Mamet question. So what does our hero want? This is question 1. So Seung Gi-hun is the main character. You can do this for pretty much every character in the show, which makes the show great, is that every character has their own wants and needs. But what does he want? Well, he wants a relationship with his daughter. That's, one of his main motivations for going in. He also wants a better relationship with his mom, because his mom is kind of disappointed in him because he's always broke and he's a degenerate gambler and all that kind of stuff. He also wants to be free of the debt. He has this incredible debt lingering over his head to the mobsters and all this kind of stuff. And he just plain wants money. It's everybody's there for the money. So it's not that much of a surprise. At 45 billion or whatever it is, 49 billion, they want the money. So number 2, what are the obstacles? And this is what makes the story really work, because there are a ton of obstacles, because the obstacles coincide with a lot of what the character wants. He wants a relationship with his daughter, but his ex-wife is in the way. His ex-wife has remarried. She's got a child with this new husband. They don't want anything to do with Seon. He's a loser. He's a degenerate gambler. They don't want anything to do with him. But he wants to have a relationship with his child. And now his ex-wife is like, we're going to take our daughter, not your daughter, our daughter, and move to the United States. And that is why Seon even goes back into the game. Another mobster, the mobsters rather, are a obstacle for him getting out of debt. They, it's very difficult when you're dealing with loan sharks in order to get out of debt. It's very difficult to do that. Another thing is his internal problems. For instance, his gambling habits. He's always, he gambled the money away that he was given to take care of his daughter, to get her something for her birthday. His mom gave him that, but his own bad habits is what gave him that. It gave him the ability to go and gamble that money away. He also has to deal with his humanity and his conscience. That's the most difficult thing about the game, is you're bonding and building relationships with people and then watching them die, and then, having to turn your back on people. And then at the end, of course, it's a knife fight to the death. So there's a lot of conscious decisions going on. There's a lot of personal relationships that are becoming an obstacle too. Not just internal, but external. His relationships that he built with the old man, with Ali, with the pickpocket, with Chu, and everybody else. He wants to see everybody else succeed just as badly as he wants to succeed himself. And then also the biggest obstacle, the number one obstacle, of course, is the games. The games are very difficult, and the games are very brutal, and you obviously in most of these situations are watching people die or hearing them die. You're hearing them cry. It's horrifying. That is, of course, the number one obstacle when you look at it, is the games. So question 3, what happens if he doesn't get it? What happens if he doesn't win the game? Well, clearly his daughter is moved to the United States and he never really sees her again. He gets killed by either the mob or gets killed in the game. And, and it's introduced later, but his mom is sick. She's got diabetes and they're talking about amputating her feet. And so that is now another thing where he needs the money to help his mom, and so that's a big deal too. So the fourth thing is why now? The fourth piece is the time bound question. Well, why now is because he runs into the guy that was smacking him in the street by playing the game. This is his opportunity. It's not an opportunity that comes along all the time. So it's an opportunity for him to make a lot of money very quickly and be set for life. So, of course, he's going to take that opportunity, and that's why now. I'm sure everybody who has seen it knows how good it is. It is excellent dramatic storytelling, excellent characters, arcs, and different things like that. And I could go through that stuff, but I would have to watch it again to do meticulous notes on it. I'm looking at one sheet of paper. I'm really riffing off of one sheet of paper of notes. So this is the show. As a review of the show, it is excellent. It is a fantastic show. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So now I want to talk a little bit about this show being a critique of capitalism. The director of the movie, the director and the writer of the film, apparently said that this movie was supposed to be a critique of capitalism. So I was saying to myself, what kind of critique is being made? And so, in watching the film, and reading the articles that I saw, is he talked about the severe competition and social inequalities. So I said to myself, okay, let's take a look at severe competition. To that point, the cutthroat nature of the game itself. Let's back up a little bit, because you can look at this capitalism thing from two different perspectives. One, the game is capitalism. Two could be that the outside world is capitalism. Now, South Korea is a capitalist country, unlike North Korea. It's a democratic country. And they have, the news and all that kind of stuff in the movie, where they talk about how many South Koreans are in debt. So there's a bit of both there, where they talk about, most South Koreans are in debt, or a lot of South Koreans are in debt. So that means that a lot of people are going to fall victim to this game eventually. That's what he's telling you through the news and all this kind of stuff that they're playing in the movie. Okay, fair enough. So let's first look at it as if the outside world is capitalism and it's so bad. Most of the characters are poor. Most of the characters don't have that much money. Seung Gi-hun is, a chauffeur. He, lives with his mom. His mom I don't know what his mom does, but she's really poor and she works well into her elderly years. Chu Hee-won's mom, Chu Sung-woon, I'm sorry, his mom runs like a food cart or something like that, but she's super proud of her son, who is, of course, the guy who went to college and everything. And just about everybody is some type of laborer, with the exception of the people who run the game. They're all fat cats with no faces. They're all fat cats and rich guys and stuff like that. So you see that it's almost a predatory system where, these guys show up with their suits and their big wads of cash, and they say, come play this game. Come play this very dangerous game. Okay. I can see that perspective saying that, but is that really a critique of capitalism? I mean, not really. It's not really a critique of capitalism. I mean, let's take a look at what might be the critique. Is it the elites? No, because they're billionaires, but are you saying that there are no elites in communist systems or socialist systems? Of course there are elites, in communist systems and socialist systems. So, even if you were to take this, they would be part of the game. But if they were even part of the government, that's still just part of the system, part and parcel to the system, business owners and stuff like that. If you allow people to own property, Some people are going to become rich. Some people are going to become poor. The thing is, with Thomas Sowell, what you will learn is that poverty is the natural state of man. There is no special situation that creates poverty. People are born poor. It's only through hard work and education and a little bit of luck and whole lot of elbow grease that you come out of that system, that you come out of that impoverishment to make the most of yourself. So the concept of the rich and the poor that's not really a critique of capitalism. It is a look at social inequality, sure, but it's not really a critique of capitalism, because you have to show me a better system. And there is no better system, and there certainly isn't a better system shown in the film, or in the series rather. There is no system in the series that is better than the system that they are given. So this leads us to the game. No, wait, let's back up a little bit, because there is, again, like I said before, a North Korean character in the show. This has been a big hang up for a lot of people. The North Korean character is asked whether her life in South Korea is better than her life in North Korea was, and she does not answer, right? And so this leads people to believe that the director / writer of the show doesn't think that North Korea is that bad, or thinks that South Korea is getting just as bad as North Korea. I think if he truly believes that, he is delusional, right? And it's not above sometimes these Hollywood elite types, even in other countries, to be completely and totally, detached from the lives of average people. Nobody would rather live in North Korea than South Korea. But if you look at the character herself, she is in South Korea alone with only her little brother. And she can't really hang out with him because she was promised that her mother and father would be brought to, or at least her mother, that I know for sure, will be brought to South Korea. So she's really unhappy. Like, her circumstances are really unhappy. Personally, she might say, I was better off in North Korea because at least I had my family when I was in North Korea, as opposed to in South Korea, I'm by myself. So that character may be able to, if depending on the character's values and different stuff like that, you might be able to argue that the character probably would have said, in North Korea, at least we were together, versus in South Korea, I'm free, and my brother is free, but my mom is not. And we're constantly worried about her and whether she's going to be able to get out of there or not. And I'm poor, and I need money, so I can say that. But I think that the writer / director, by putting that piece in this whole ordeal, is being really ridiculous. It is. There is no comparison between North Korea and South Korea. And I'm pretty sure if you put them in a room and ask them, hey, do you think that life is great in North Korea? And it's less than 200 miles away? There's no way. He would have to be detached to the point of not really even being from South Korea, to believe that North Korea and South Korea are any way comparable. So I do believe that he just, dropped the ball there. But I think also if you look at the character wants to bring her family back together. She's a miserable character anyway. It makes sense the way that he wrote it, because the character can be like, hey, at least I'm not in North Korea, because then they wouldn't play the game, but they need the money too. So it's like, I can't get what I need done. Nobody's going to give me the money. I have to either work for it, and it's a lot of money. I have to work for it, or I can win this game and be gifted all this money. So if the concept of the show is that the outside world, or South Korea, is supposed to be a critique of capitalism and its social inequalities, then I don't see it, because social inequality exists in every system in human history. It just exists. There's always, like, when there was kings, there were serfs. And communists, there was the elites, the bourgeoisie, and then there was the proletariat. In capitalism, there's going to be the CEOs and the rich and the managers and all this kind of stuff, and there's going to be the day laborers and the construction workers, etc., etc. But only in capitalism can somebody go from day laborer to CEO. You can't do it in a socialist system because you don't own the property. You can't do it in a feudal system with the kings and the lords and all of them. You can't do that. You can't be a boss there either unless you kill the king and assume the throne. You can't become the king, and you have to usually be in the king's bloodline to even get away with that. So looking at the system and saying that the social inequality of the system is growing, I can believe that. It's supposed to be a mirror of the real world, where real world inequality is increasing due to the pandemic. And, but all of that is government stuff. The government shut down the economy. That's not capitalism. Capitalism is it's about free exchange. It's not about what governments do. In fact, governments doing stuff is prominently anti-capitalism. All right, so we can wash away the entire concept that South Korea, the outside world within the context of the movie, is supposed to be a critique of capitalism, because there's nothing there that that is really critiquing capitalism. And if you want to say that everybody's in debt, in debt to banks, in debt to other people, stuff costs too much. In that situation, even if you, let's say, you got rid of interest, you still have debt, right? Because debt is about borrowing, Debt is not about the interest rate. People go into debt by borrowing. The moment you borrow money, you're in debt. So the only way to defeat that is to make borrowing illegal. That means I can't loan you something or loan you money until next week, because that debt would be illegal. It would be illegal for me to loan something to you and then expect it back. That means that anytime I give you something, it would have to be a gift, right? So if you were to, let's say, ban debt, you would probably kill 99% of corporations and businesses of all kinds. Most people don't have startup money on hand when they start something. They have to go into debt in order to buy something or start something. Most people go into debt to start their businesses, to start their education, et cetera, and then they work their way out of it. If you were to ban debt, that means you would have to have all the money necessary to run your business right now. And that is almost damn near impossible. You cannot run an economy that way, right? You can't. So you need to have a system of debt. Now, in our American context, what we did that made a mistake is we went from a system of savers to a system of spenders. And what that means is, from my readings, of course, what I saw was credit cards and home loans used to only go to people who had money, right? Credit cards existed for a long time. They used to be like store credit cards, right? But you never could actually get one if you were broke. But now you can be broke as hell and get a credit card. Therefore, a bunch of people go into credit card debt. You get a credit card and you just start spending it on stuff, and next you're in credit card debt. You can be 17 years old and all of a sudden you get in the envelope in the mail that says, "Hey, borrow $25,000 from us to go to college." And then you take that money and you sign it over, and the government gives you $25,000, and you don't know you got to pay it back or not, and you do, plus interest. So, yeah, we can say that the problem with credit, or the problem with debt, is that we began to run our economy on debt. It's okay for people who have collateral to have debt. It is not okay for average Joes who are, that can't calculate interest to go out and accrue debt, because they'll never get out of it, And I learned this the hard way by being one of these idiots who went into debt going to college, So that's how the debt system works. Debt does not go away in a communist or socialist system. You can still borrow money, Now they may kill the interest rate, like in some societies, they'll say that you can't charge interest, or it had to be very low interest. Okay, but you still have to, incur some kind of debt. Even if it's just, hey, I need to borrow some eggs today. I'll give you 3 eggs. If you give me 2, I'll give you 3 in 2 days or something like that. You're going to incur some kind of debt in order to run an economy in every single society. Kings were in debt. A king would borrow money to go to war and stuff like that. You would borrow money from the bankers to go to war. Everybody goes into debt eventually, one way or another. You can't run an economy without it. So this concept that capitalism is creating debt and social inequality is like, no, social inequality is the natural order of things. There's always going to be people who are born better off than people who are not. That's just the natural order of things. There's nothing you can do about that. The only thing that you can do is open up avenues for other people to make money and to make opportunities. And this is where we bring into the game. So let's say the game itself is a critique of capitalism. So the game is highly regimented, as I said before. The shapes is very hierarchical, much like a a capitalist system. It is very hierarchical. You have your low-level controllers. They do all the grunt work. They carry the bodies out. They chop up the bodies. They bury the bodies. They burn the bodies. Then you have what was the next? The squares. The squares have a different job. They oversee the triangles. The circles are overseeing the squares, and then everybody's overseeing them. That's much like a capitalist system if you look at it from the context of, a hospital. You have your orderlies. They may do a lot of the grunt work, of helping people get into wheelchairs, changing bedpans, stuff like that. Then the nurses will come in. They'll do the vitals. They'll do all this kind of stuff. Then the doctors will come in. So you can look at it from that perspective and say, okay, that's a capitalist system. Of course, all systems are hierarchical. Hierarchy is natural. This is the Jordan Peterson concept, right? So, hierarchies is built into human experiences. The only thing you can do is try to flatten it a little bit, but you need to have a division of labor because there are different things that need to be done and everybody can't do everything, right? Let's take the Squid Game, for instance. You can't leave all the bodies, all the dead people just laying around. Somebody's got to move them, right? So, and the games also need to be organized and everything else all this stuff needs to happen at one time. So, you're going to pick a class of people. Let's call them the triangles. You triangles are going to be the people that are going to clean up the bodies while we do other things that need to be done that are more important than cleaning up the bodies, or that might be a little bit more complex than cleaning up the bodies, much like organizing the games. I mean, somebody has to put the game structure and stuff like that together. Now, maybe it's the squares designing it or whatever, and the triangles are going out there and actually putting it together, however that goes. But somebody's got to be the architect and actually write this stuff down, how this thing works, and put it together. Somebody has to finance it, and therefore they're going to be your elites with your golden masks. All those people are going to be the ones that are going to finance the game. Somebody's got to create the pot so that people can play. So you need to have all the people at the top. Otherwise, if there are no people at the top, there is no game. So that's another capitalist concept right there. If you don't have a CEO or shareholders, which you can look at it from that perspective, the guy with the black masks, and you look at the guys with the golden masks, you could say the guy with the black mask is a CEO. The guys with the golden mask, they are the shareholders. Without them, there is no pot. If there is no pot, there is no game. If there is no game, then all these people who are dead, broke, and poor won't have an opportunity to make any money. And yes, the villains are the ones who are saying we're giving them an opportunity to climb up the social ladder. But of course, a bunch of people are going to die in order for that to happen. And that is seemingly our critique of capitalism, right? That these CEOs and shareholders at the very top of the game are saying, we're going to give you lowly folks the opportunity to rise up and be like us, even though you can never really be us. All this is a gift. from your hard work and your luck and hard work. That's all this is. It's not really you making you one of us, because if you were one of us, you would never have been in the game in the first place. You wouldn't be in that situation. You would actually be out in the real world making money and wearing one of these golden masks. So perhaps that is our critique of capitalism. But you have to ask the question, in what systems does that not occur? Right? People always say, or they always think, that a communist or a socialist system does not have elites. That is false, right? There is no, in fact, there are probably the only difference, I should say, as I back up a little bit, is that you can't displace the elites in a socialist or a communist system, but you can in a capitalist system. You can always displace the elites, right? And by displace, I mean you can either join them or you can bring them down. So when has that ever happened? Well, look at what's that silver-haired guy on CNN? What's his name? Anderson Cooper. He comes from the Vanderbilt family. The Vanderbilt family was a multi-billionaire family. They were robber barons or whatever socialists would call them in the day. He didn't get any of that money. Why? That money is gone. Where did it go? There were generations of Vanderbilts before him that spent that money. That money is gone. Now he still got a name, and he still got the genes, and they still have the connections, which is why he's on television. But he doesn't have the fabulous Vanderbilt wealth that he was probably set up to have, because it just don't have it. There's hundreds of supposedly multi-millionaire families, people who used to, their grandparents, and maybe not even grandparents, their great-great-grandparents probably owned slaves. And now they don't have a penny to their name. That kind of stuff happens in capitalist systems. It doesn't really happen in socialist systems, because you can always just rob people more. If there's a reason why in a lot of these South American countries, you'll see these fat cats. And I forget which country that was, where a guy was talking about starving people in his country, and he had an empanada in his drawer, and he just pulled it out and bit it. I think was it Chavez? Or it might not have been Chavez. It might have been somebody else, but it was in South America. I believe it was in Argentina, or was it Venezuela or something like that, where, in these socialist systems, these guys are filthy fucking rich, and they just pretend that they're poor. And if they ever try to lose anything, you try to displace them, they'll have you killed because you're anti-revolutionary. So no, you can't displace the millionaires and the billionaires. You can join them in the capitalist system, or you can bring them down by not buying their products, by not going into their businesses. You can actually bring them down, or you can bring them down by, just waiting it out over time, generations. We see from plenty of graphs and charts and stuff like that each successive generation after the money is made typically makes less money than the previous generation. So when you look at some great empires, what would typically happen is the parent will make all the money. Daddy makes all the money. He started the company, he funded it, he made all the cash. The next generation grows up rich, doesn't really understand the value of the company, doesn't really understand the value of a dollar. They probably spend because they don't have any problems, but they don't have daddy's work ethic. They don't have daddy's drive. They get to, live in daddy's house and drive daddy's cars and all that kind of stuff, but they don't have the same work ethic and the same drive and the same passion as daddy. So once daddy dies, he leaves $100 billion to his kids or whatever. Now they're spending into that $100 billion as he gets old. Now the thing is, they have to maintain that $100 billion, but they're gonna want to spend it, and then they do silly stuff like getting people pregnant out of wedlock, or making silly business deals, or starting companies and the company goes out of business. This is a Donald Trump thing where he would start all these different businesses and they would go out of business. There was a bunch of other systems where bad things happen. You lose a bunch of money on stocks, or you do something absolutely silly, like you sell what daddy made all the money off of. You inherit a big company, and you like, hey, I'm just going to go and sell it. So then you sell it, you get a big influx of cash, but you don't have that asset anymore. So now as you spend, you're making less, 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 less. And then over generations, that big pot starts to dwindle more and more and more. And until the point where you don't have any money. So that's a capitalist system that you can displace them. It's not going to be overnight. Very few people go from rich to broke overnight. Maybe in the stock market. But, true CEOs and true entrepreneurs, people who are really smart, they very rarely go from very rich to very poor overnight. And it's also very rare for you to go from one way to the other overnight. Most of the time that stuff is in stages. You have to downgrade things or slowly upgrade things. So how does that system fold into the game? Well, because we don't really see how it goes into the game. Because the game is written in a way where the characters are supposed to be equals. This is what we're told. This is what Mass tells us, is that everybody is equal in the game, or everybody's supposed to have the same opportunities. And this, of course, is the capitalist. What people feel is the capitalist lie, that you're all equal under the law. In this case, everybody's equal under the rules. Okay, that's one way of looking at things. And I think that is absolutely true. But again, what we learn from Thomas Sowell is that there is no such thing as equality, right? In the game, when you look at the players, some are old, some are young. In certain parts of the game, people have more experience with the game than other people. For instance, there's the glass game, which is, I think, in episode 7 or 8, where there's a guy in the game who knows more about glass than everybody else. So what happens? The blackface turns off the lights because he knows that this guy has an opportunity. He got an advantage that the other players don't have. And he's already told them everybody has to be equal in the game. So if you show that you're more proficient at, understanding glass than all the other players, you can win and cause them to die and get killed. So he turned the lights off. That way everybody's blind. And yeah, it was fucked up when he did it. But he did it in a way to try to enforce that equality standard, which you wouldn't do in a capitalist system, right? In a capitalist system, you would say, damn, he knows more about glass than I do. He's got that advantage. He might win because he knows more about glass. In that type of situation, in a capitalist system, there will be nobody there to hold him by the ankle and stop him from being able to utilize that little advantage that he has. Some people have the advantage of actually having played those games before. This is what we see with Ali. Ali is he's Indian, he's not Korean. So some of these games he don't even know. So that's an advantage. That's a difference. Of course, the tug of war, there was women and old people. If you had a woman or an old person on your team in a tug of war, you're at a disadvantage. They managed to get away from that by utilizing strategy. But that shows you that even though the bosses and the shapes and all these people are supposed to be inspiring you or trying to get you to recognize that everything is equal, it is not equal. And they have to try to enforce it because it's not naturally occurring, right? So the game itself is not really even capitalism, but it's the closest thing to a critique of capitalism actually in the show. Now, in any event, I really enjoyed the show. I thought it was excellent. I think as a critique of capitalism, it's not very good. I don't think it makes me really question capitalist economies or capitalism in general. I think it shows me that the writer probably didn't understand capitalism, which a lot of people don't. Capitalism is about free exchange. It's not about hierarchies. It's not about billionaires and bosses and all that kind of stuff. It's all about free exchange. And that was the part that really kind of made the game the most capitalistic aspect of it, because the game was voluntary. And they could volunteer to back out of the game at any time. They chose not to, which is what leads me to my last point, is that I think even though a lot of atrocious things happen in the game, the players had an opportunity to back out. They knew people would die. They saw people die. They saw people get gunned down. And early in the movie, or earlier in the show, we saw that when they quit initially and people voted their way out of the game, 93% of the people came back. 7% of the people who went into the game the first time did not come back. Those are the good people. The people who came back were the greedy and the desperate. Those were the people who were willing to kill and be killed in order to succeed. That's very extreme. So I wouldn't call it a critique of capitalism, but even if you want to say that it is, it's not a very good one. In any event, the show was great. The show was fantastic. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, donate to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later.